Hi, Susan here from itsmysustainablelife.com. Thanks for joining me here today. I wanted to take a few moments and just go over all things mason jars. Lord knows we love our mason jars here on the hill, and we use them a lot in our canning practices, in our crafts, in our storage purposes. So we really utilize them to their fullest capacity. It can be pretty confusing, especially for the beginner canner, to determine appropriate mason jar size, of which to use when, what size mouth, what's the difference between mouth sizes, how can I create appropriate size labels. So hopefully today we're going to go over all of that and really debunk a lot of the mystery when it comes to choosing your mason jar size. So first off, what are considered safe canning jars? Well, here in the United States, we have pretty much one conglomerate, if you will, one manufacturer that manufactures the majority of what's considered safe canning jars. And those consist of Ball, of Kerr, and there's a Canadian branch of that, Bernardine, I believe it's called. So these jars are considered safe canning jars because they're manufactured to withstand the high temperatures that are created through canning processing, as well as the pressure, the high pressure that's also created through the canning process. And fortunately, since all of the mason jars that are considered safe here in the United States are manufactured by the same company, or umbrella underneath the same company, if you will, the beauty of that is it's pretty standard sizing throughout. So it really takes out a lot of the guesswork of what's available for. Now I will say these jars are not inexpensive. So it's an investment for the home canner to really put their money where it should be put, and that's in the equipment that you use. And canning jars are one of those things. So it can be really easy and tempting to use jars that you may save from purchased products. I highly recommend that you don't do that. They can shatter, they cannot seal properly, they can really put your product at risk. So when you are canning, you really want to stay with the typical mason jar with a threaded rim and a lid that are actually made for home canning purposes. Now there are a few exceptions to that rule, as with everything, but I just personally don't go there. The National Center for Home Food Preservation does say that you can use certain jars that are manufactured with purchased goods for canning, but I personally don't go there. I recommend using a safe canning jar that's been tried and true and tested. Why take the risk? Now, although these mason jars are reusable over and over and over again until they become damaged, so you want no breaks or chips around the rim, you don't want any cracks within it, anything that shows a weakness within that jar, as long as they're good to go, they can be reused over and over again. So that really decreases your overall expenditure in your canning process. However, there are two-piece rims and lids that need to be utilized when you can. So the lid goes on top of your jar, and then the rim goes, it's a threaded rim, and it screws on top, the screw band, if you will. These lids cannot be reused, or I should say, I don't reuse them. Some people go there, I don't recommend it. Botulism is a real thing, people. So you can see the rubber gasket that's created this kind of reddish outline around the back of that rim. That, during the high heat and high pressure when you're processing, can weaken. And that really decreases the likelihood of you creating a safely canned product when reusing lids. So I don't recommend reusing them. They're fairly inexpensive to replace. They're repurposed at the end. I always save my lids from my canning jars when I open them. I save the lids and repurpose them. I'll be showing you soon how I make garden markers with these. You can create so many different things with them, and you reuse it for dry goods even, or storage, refrigerator storage. So they're reusable, they're just not reusable for. So when it comes to mason jar size, there's really only two factors you have to consider. One is the capacity, or how much the jar itself will hold. And that's typically within ounces and cups, and it's easily converted into mLs. And the other factor you need to take into consideration is wide mouth and regular mouth. So mouth sizes, wide mouth is like this. You can see the opening. This is the mouth of the jar. That's a wide mouth jar. This is a regular jar opening. So you can see the size differences within those two. There's quite a bit of size. As far as selecting the appropriate jar size for what it is that you'll be canning really boils down to two factors in my opinion. One, what's going to be convenient for your family size? If you have a family of two, pretty much you wouldn't be using, half gallons to can, your juice. That would be a pretty big size, and it could lead to food waste. So you'd want to go down to a smaller size. Now on the opposite spectrum, too small a size means you use more jars, more lids, and more rims during the processing. So that can lead, if you use, if it's something that you use very rarely or small amounts of, then obviously you'd want to go with a smaller jar. But if you don't, by going with that smaller jar, you're using more product, and it'll just increase your overall monetary investment, if you will, in that canning process. Now that being said, as with any canning process, you want to utilize, or I recommend you utilize, tried and true recipes. And by that I mean, the Ball book of canning recipes and so forth. Recipes that have been tested and are safe. And within those recipes, they give recommendations for jar sizes of what would be appropriate. And the reason they give those recommendations is because those sizes are the sizes that have been tested for processing times. So you want to create perfect processing times in order to create safe. Now, the other factor you want to consider is the shape of the jar. So here we have two different shapes. Find a good example here. So we have two different shapes here. Here we have a straight-sided. You can see there's no curvature inward where the jar would curve in before the threaded area. Here we have a curvature, or what is considered a shouldered mason jar. Shouldered mason jars are great to hold, so they're wonderful for any type of fluid, juice. I actually drink my water out of these. I can keep track of how much I drink by drinking out of a quart-sized water jar. So that is really a good purpose. Anything small in size would be okay in order to be able to use the shouldered mason jar. Straight size jars are just easier to fill. There's more of an opening at the top of the space of the circumference of the jar. So larger things like whole tomatoes, larger pieces of fruit, things like that. It's easier to fill the jar itself during the processing time, and they're easier to clean. The shoulder jars, obviously there's a curvature within that jar, and sometimes it's difficult to get, the cleaning in there. So, they're just slight considerations to think about when you're choosing which form of mason jar you want to use. Now, straight mason jars tend to be a bit more pricey for some reason. I don't know why, but they are. As far as shouldered, they're a little bit less inexpensive. Not enough to break the bank, but if you're buying, quite a few of them, it can make a difference. As far as lid sizes, the regular mouth lid is about 2 3/4 inches complete diameter. So that's the outer edge to outer edge of that lid. As far as mason jar size labels, if you want to make a round or a decorative label to go on top, which is wonderful to do if you're giving them away. The regular mouth size label I utilize is 2 inches. Wide mouth lids from outer edge to outer edge is about 3 3/8 of an inch. And I utilize a 2.5 inch round label to make a decorative label for my gift. When it comes to mason jar sizes, there are really just 4 sizes that I absolutely love and I use all the time in my canning practices. So the first is the largest, and this is a 64 ounce 2 liter half gallon size. The next size for me is a quart size, or 32 ounces. Then following, I love this one for my salsas. It's just the perfect size. It's a pint size and it's 16 ounces. And then there's half pint, which is great for jellies and jams and so forth. So these are the sizes I really recommend you having on hand if you're going to do some serious canning. You know, whether you go for the shouldered or the straight size, that's really dependent upon what you're going to be canning, what's going to be easiest for you, what your budget is. It's really going to be a personal choice. So although there are a lot of different mason jar sizes in addition to these few that I've shown you, I'm going to guarantee you'll probably end up with a few of your favorites that you have. But it does give you the baseline of what to look for in the mouth size, in the jar size, in the label size, and I hope it's given you a bit of information, especially you beginners out there. It's so easy to be overwhelmed through the process. So thanks for joining itsmysustainablelife.com. Make sure you leave your comments below. I'd love to get chatting about any questions you might have in regard to mason jar size. I thank you for joining me here on the Hill. Look forward to seeing you soon.